6 steps in hypothesis testing, population proportion, problem 2. Let's first recall the outline for the 6 steps. Step number 1, we state the null and the alternative and type a tail. Number 2, we state the level of significance, the alpha level. Step number 3, we calculate the value of the test statistic. It involves this formula for proportions. Step number 4, we find the p-value from a table, StatCrunch, or Minitab. Step number 5, we determine our outcome if we fail to reject HO, or if we reject HO and conclude H1. Step number 6, we state the conclusion of the test in clear English. Let's do an example. In a nationwide telephone poll, 1,550 adults were asked, do you believe that a person who becomes a victim of a muggings or holdup has the right to take matters into his or her hands? 48% answered yes. Test the hypothesis that fewer than 50% of American adults believe that crime victims have a right to take matters into their own hands. Use a significance level of alpha equal 0.01. So our first step is to identify our information. So the sample size is 1,550. That's how many people answered the telephone poll. We're also given that p hat, the sample proportion, was 48%. The alternative is fewer than 50% of Americans. So this is the claim. The alpha level is 0.01. So we have enough to complete the test. So for step 1, the claim is given in the problem. Fewer than 50% of American adults believe that crime victims have a right to take matters into their own hands. That's the claim. So from this claim we can say that P is less than 0.5, less than 50%. The assumed value of the population proportion is 50%, 0.5. Step number 2, we have our alpha level, 0.01. Step 3, so from the information that we know that N is 1,550. We know that p hat is 0.48. In order to use technology, we have to compute the value of x. So the formula for p hat is x over n. Substituting these values in, we have the equation 0.48, that's p hat, equals x divided by n. Now solving for x, we need to multiply both sides by 1550, and we get x to be 744. Step number 4, the p-value will come from this test statistic. We can use technology or we can use a table. Step number 5, we're going to make one of two choices once we have the p-value. We're going to either fail to reject the null, or we're going to reject the null and conclude the alternative. And again, if we fail to reject the null, we're saying that there is not sufficient evidence for the claim. If we reject the null and conclude the alternative, then we state that there is sufficient evidence for the claim. So the data from the sample is going to either be evidence for the null hypothesis or for the alternative hypothesis. Step number 6, again, we always start with stating the alpha level, and then we state, is there sufficient evidence for the claim, or is there not sufficient evidence for the claim? And this should be in terms of the problem. So let's calculate our test statistic and p-value. We'll begin by using StatCrunch. We go to Stat, Proportion Statistics, one sample with summary. Number of successes is x, 744. N is 1,550. For the null, we type in 0.5. For the alternative, we're doing a left-tailed test less than 0.5. We hit Compute, and our test statistic is a negative 1.57, and the p-value is 0.0577. Using Minitab, we go to Stat, Basic Statistics, 1 Proportion. We select Summarize Data. We put in X, we put in N, click Perform Hypothesis Test. We type in the null, 0.5, hit Options, change the alternative to a less than, and we want to check Use Test and Interval based upon normal distribution. That's the Z. So we hit OK. And in the session window, this is our test statistic, negative 1.57, and we have a p-value of 0.058. Using the TI graphing calculator, we hit our stat button, we scroll to tests, down to number 5, 1 proportion z-test. We type in the null, 0.5, x, 744, n, 1550. We select less than the null, then we hit calculate. This is our z. Here's our p-value. So back to the outline. The null, p equals 0.5. The alternative, p is less than 0.5. And this is a left tail test. The alpha level is 0.01. The test statistic, we have p null as being 0.5, x being 744, n being 1050, and p hat being 0.48. Plugging these values into the formula, we see that the z is a negative 1.57. Step number 4, we draw a picture. Since we're using a left tail, we color in this section. So on our z-scale, this would be a negative 1.57, and the area of this tail is our p-value, and the p-value from StatCrunch is 0.0577. So step number 5, we use the p-value and compare it to the alpha level, and we would state, because the p-value equals 0.0577, which is greater than alpha being equal to 0.01, we fail to reject the null. Step number 6, at the alpha equal 0.01 level of significance, there is not sufficient evidence to support the claim that fewer than 50% of American adults believe that crime victims have a right to take matters into their own hands. Thanks for watching.